Cool.
Yeah.
All right then. So I guess we can go ahead and get started.
All right.
Cool. So thanks for coming in to interview today, Luke. My name's Matt, and you're going to be interviewing for a generalist role at this company.
Great.
Uh, so I guess before we get started, could you tell me a little bit about yourself? Yeah.
Yeah. So I got my degree at University of Colorado Boulder. Uh, I've been since then just sort of working on a lot of personal projects. I had one interview in Boulder developing a financial model for the chief investment officer of a little company called Focus Point Capital, which is mainly a hedge fund. So that was a great experience because that's really what I most like to do. I think it's pretty fascinating to work with data, to transform data, and really to basically pull in a sequence of numbers, a data frame, and then almost look into that, develop senses so that you can really like pull different, uh, you know, pull whatever info out of that you want. It just feels very creative, and it's extraordinarily interesting to me. Since then, I've been largely working on developing my portfolio website, and just a few personal projects. I'm really fascinated in trying to mimic text, which is what I've been working on lately.
Uh,
Along, yeah.
what do you mean by mimic text? Like handwriting, or?
Not like handwriting, but like the structure and grammar of them.
Okay.
Yeah, so I a big author that I try to use is Lovecraft because I think he's an especially big challenge to mimic because he kind of writes these pulpy, not the best stories, but he also, you can imagine him just like flipping through a thesaurus as he's writing. He uses way too many massive words.
That's it.
And so, yeah, I think it would be fascinating to be able to, just pull in his collected works and then spit out, more Lovecraft.
Right. So there's probably a lot of moving pieces behind the scenes. The most complex thing that I've seen is like just basic Markov chains.
Hmm.
But what kind of things would you have to do to I guess pick up his style and not just
Well, yeah, it's
yeah.
interesting because I started out actually sort of the first like project that I took up on my own was trying to mimic it with bigrams and then like constructing a sentence tree using that natural language toolkit, part of speech tagger. So it was horribly memory inefficient. Basically, I built a tree that represented every single the part of speech sequence of every single sentence in whatever I put in, and
Mhm.
then constructed a dictionary which would have every example of each part of speech. So then, when you're generating, you basically step down the tree. You say, "Okay, I need a noun next." You look in the noun dictionary, and then sample from like a probability distribution to pull out, some random noun based on how frequently that noun pops up. Um, and then, step down to the next part of speech.
I see.
But the long short term memory is pretty astounding. It actually kind of does a lot of the work for you just implicitly, in the mathematics behind the recurrent neural network. So it stores a state. It's sort of like a standard neural network, only it stores this state so that it can have some representation of everything that it's seen before. And that state, once it's trained, sort of implicitly can recognize, uh, well, so the best thing I think is the visualizations that you'll see online. So people will graph a text or sort of show a text and then highlight words based off of whether a particular, quote unquote, like neuron is activated for that letter. And so you can see it recognizing, like, it'll light up when it sees a quote and then get stronger and stronger, saying basically, okay, I really need to close off this quotation soon. Or after a period, one of them will light up and
I see.
say, okay, the next letter needs to be capitalized.
So you're not going to get these infinitely long run-on sentences or
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
repeated things. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's really fascinating. The unfortunate thing is that it doesn't feel as custom because the last one, it was, I was sort of coming up with how I would represent it, but frankly, it's a lot more powerful, and there are PhDs working on these
mhm.
things, so, you get much more rapid results, basically.
And so the short and long-term memory, I guess that mostly applies to grammar and structure and not really content, right? Or does it also apply to
Yeah,
content?
I think, I mean, so that one's confusing as applied to natural language processing because I think the long short term memory, like lingo, applies to, the original recurrent neural nets had this problem with exploding gradients, which I can't necessarily explain the math behind, but you see it sometimes even in long short term memory where basically, um, some neuron will, overtrain in one direction, it'll get way too big or way too small. And basically, you'll see the accuracy going up, 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 like 30, 40, 50, and then suddenly it skyrockets down and the cost goes way up. And so long short term memory was just a way to sort of solve that problem, make sure that um, it can basically keep track of both what was happening a very long time ago and what was happening very recently, and then there's a forget gate, which will drop out neurons if they start to sort of explode. At least as I understand it.
All right, that makes
Yeah.
sense. So then at your internship, um, if you could remind me what you did there, and then also like what kind of well, I guess could you remind me what you did at your internship again?
Yeah. So that was much more traditional statistics. It was basically loading in. So the way I constructed it, which was similar to how my boss had constructed his, only his was in Excel. If I use it myself, I made it a lot more flexible. The general idea was for my model, the way I constructed it was to pull in, lots of data from like indicators. So you pull in economic data from, tracking a given feature, say like oil prices in a given month, and then uh, I decided to use a sort of heuristic function to estimate how powerful each of those indicators should be. And the general idea was what I used as a heuristic, what worked best while I was there, was just correlation with the S&P 500. So of course, if something goes up and then the S&P 500 goes way up, then you can say that's very strongly correlated. That should definitely have a big impact on the model.
Right.
And then you can do negative correlation as well. If something skyrockets and the S&P 500 goes up, you can use that to make predictions. And so then basically once it's, got all that economic data, it constructs its own functions. So you really just say, I want an estimation for the month of February 2018 or whatever. And it'll pull in all of the data it needs for each of those predictor functions from all of those columns. You do the actual predictor function, which takes in those sort of slices of the data frame and then spits out one number between -1 and 1. And then that ultimate output, it was nicely shaped enough to sort of coerce into -1 to 1 overall. Basically, I just normalized the output and then run that through a sigmoid, which outputs between 0 and 1. Just sort of completely borrowed that idea from machine learning. And then then you can very neatly interpret the sigmoid between 0 and 1, with 0 being, please don't invest, take out all your money, stick it in treasuries, or 1 being, for example, at the very tail end of the financial crisis, when everything started to come back and it was a totally sure bet that investments made would make money. Then it would be near 1. It would say, invest all your money. The market is super low risk.
Okay. So then, so how were you iterating on this? Were you working by yourself, or you said the idea sounded was kind of inspired by work that your boss had done in the past?
Yeah, so it was very much it was actually a great experience because it was almost entirely I was doing all of the development on my own, and then Periodically, I would meet up with my boss, Caleb Sevian, and we would sort of chat about what I was doing. He would give me feedback, tell me what he thought would be a good idea, what he thought wouldn't be a good idea. So like once I remember I was training the model and getting kind of ridiculously high numbers of predicted, investment because you've got to have some metric of how well you think your model is going to do when you apply it to the market.
Mm-hmm.
And I was getting these numbers that were so high, I told him I think there's got to be something going on. It kind of doesn't make sense. And he pointed out that, which really I should have been thinking about all along. When your model has all of that data and it can maximize every parameter on historical data, it's very similar to in machine learning, like saying, okay, I've got 99.9% accuracy on the training set, so I can predict every example going forward. It doesn't generalize because the model can essentially choose the parameters that are most risky, but also yield the highest reward. So you're inevitably going to get, the best that you could have gotten on that historical data. But then going forward, if you listen to what the model says, you'll be investing at ludicrously risky levels,
Right. Well, that essentially sounds like overfitting, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Very much so. Yeah.
All right. Cool. Well, those sound like really interesting projects, and it's good to hear that you were able to chat about them in some pretty good detail. All right. So I guess we can turn our attention to the coder pad tab.
Yeah.
We're going to work on a fairly simple algorithm here, and it's around query string parsing. So, oops, there we go. Parse query string. So if I do something like parse query string equals hello, bar equals world, this should return a dictionary that looks like foo, hello, and bar world. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Right.
All right.
Okay. So what I'm thinking is that we can really just get rid of that question mark, but that's pretty easy. We can just do a lot of this on one line. I think we could say something like params equals query string starting at index 1, since we don't need that question mark, and then split it on question mark. Ampersand. And then we've got a lot of oh, that's this. Okay. Foo equals hello. That should be a string. Oh, this doesn't do that. Foo equals hello. R equals world. So then we can just say, and hopefully this will work, for param and params, or well, I guess I gotta initialize this dictionary. So equals empty dictionary for scope. And then we could say we can split that again on the equal sign. And presumably, if it's well formatted, there should only be one for each. So then we can actually, I think we can split on a list to say something like name value, or we can even use the dictionary syntax. Key value equals param dot split on that equal sign, and then just say param values of key is equal to value, and then return param values.
All right. That all makes sense. We can run it, and There we go. Cool.
Nice.
So that works. So I have a feature request. So uh, if the value is missing, it should default to we'll say the boolean true.
All right. So then if the value is missing, that should just look like something like, oh, yeah, yeah, you've already got it in there.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. So we could try this split, like do a try except. Well, I guess it would be in, yeah, it would be right there where it would mess up. So let me just think for a sec. I guess we could do, well, I guess we could do an if statement and see how long the list is that we get out of param.split. That's not very elegant, but kind of trying to go quickly here. So we could say something like keyval equals param.split. If length of keyval equals 1, then param values key just equals true. Else this.
Okay. So that's.
Oh wait. Oh, sorry. Wait a minute. Sorry. I messed up with the key val because it's just one dictionary. I don't have key and val. So then
Right.
key val, just that index, or otherwise, param values key val 0 equals key val 1.
Cool. So that's good. And now I have another feature request. Believe it or not, this is actually a valid query string. I've only seen this in practice once. But
Right.
you can specify keys multiple times. So
Oh yeah.
baz equals again. So then what I would like to see here is if you want to do this as a tuple or an array, doesn't matter. Some sort of list.
Right.
It should be an array of the values in the order that they appeared.
Sure. Okay, so we're already stepping through params in order. So then, let's see. I'm just trying to think if there's a way we can do this elegantly, which I'm not so sure. Let's see. Yeah, not so sure about that. So then we can really just add another test. So then split, and then we gotta check right here if that parameter is already in there. So then if keyval 0, which is guaranteed to exist in a well-formatted string, is in param values, then we really we just have to do this. There's probably a better way to do this. Can I do a helper method?
Sure.
All right. I'll do. Oh, whoops. Do that. So then, let's see. What am I adding here again? Okay. Oh no, I really actually don't think I even need that. Okay, so if that's in param values, then let's see, length key val. And again, I would try and clean this up for elegance if it was, if I was doing production code, but for now, for rapidness, we can just say then param values key val 0. Well, so then I guess the difficult thing is that there are 3 cases. So there's either you're having two parameters, or you've got three parameters and it's already in list form. Um, huh. So that's actually a little puzzling. Um, okay. We could just add endless list statements, but it really does feel like, you know, it really does feel like there's some better way. Maybe using get, like that dictionary method. So I'll try that. Let's do uh, herval equals param values dot get of keyval 0, and then I suppose return none if it's not there. And then so we basically have to test if that's a list or not anything, or so basically now I think is the place for a good conditional. So if curval is none, then we can add in regular param values. Elif curve value, I suppose, I don't know if you check how something is a list. Or so, wait, no, so, okay, we know that if it's not none, then we're just adding to a list. It has to be a list, basically.
Well, you said there were three cases earlier, right?
Yeah,
So these this is not a list down here.
yeah,
And this is not a list.
yeah, yeah. And then, yeah, that other one is, so, All right. Let me just think for a second, if that's all right. So really the difficult thing is to construct out of a list. It would be nice if list, like list plus some value would just append that to the list. But it really can't do that. So I'm just kind of, I forget how to check if, something is a list. Like to do that would be,
You like type no?
oh, right.
List, right?
Oh, yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. So then we just need to say param values of yeah. So then we also need to check, if there's a key and a value. So then check if key value, or check if value, basically. And then else we've got this simple case. Okay. Okay. Then eval equals 1. Okay, I'll just read over, oh, right, and do this. So then curval. Oh, wait a minute. I need to construct a list here. So this none case is really the simple case. And then here is where I need to construct a case. So then, so much copying and pasting. Okay. Param values, key val 0. Equals, and we can just do oh wait, oh yeah, equals, well, so okay, so here it's already a list. Here we need to construct a list. So that's kind of we can just do list of um, or otherwise. Man, it's so ugly that it's actually line wrapping. It's, at least on my screen.
Yeah, yeah, I've got it zoomed in quite a bit too, and it's on my screen
Yeah.
as well.
Okay. Well, it's not pretty, but I believe it'll work. I'll just read over it one more time for typos. So split on the equal sign. Um, get the current value. If there is no current value, then just add the value. Otherwise, if it's a list, just append the new value. Otherwise, if it's not, we need to construct a list. So turn it into the first element of a list, and then keep moving on. This might have trouble with strings, I think, because that might split the string into a bunch of characters. So we can instead do. Oh wait, but oh man, yeah, but then the list might. Or yeah, no, okay, so we can just do this. I was thinking about the other case. So hopefully that won't fail on any string or anything. We just construct a list out of those two, which really could be a tuple, but that's all right. So okay, I think that code should work. No, dict object. Oh yeah, I did param values.append.
Oh,
I need to actually access this. So
okay.
let's just.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, but we've got
It's
a
kind of close.
nested dictionary there. Yeah. Oh, oh, okay. I keep making little tiny errors here because I was trying to do the plus, and if you do plus, then the other thing has to be a list,
Right.
in order to concatenate. Okay.
Okay. And that is the right order. So yeah, so that looks correct. Cool. And if we wanted to, well, I'm saying we want to. Can we make this a little more dry? With this
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
copy
sort of
logic here.
condense that. Yeah, so let me think about the best way to do that. Um, so really, it would be easiest if they were just all lists, but that isn't really how this is expected to be parsed. Um, so let's do. Hmm. Uh, so really, I think that we can at least test if. So what I'm thinking is we would test if it's in the key, in the keys of the dictionary already, and then if it's not, that's the simple case, and otherwise we know that it should be a list. Also, yeah, I'm really actually kind of struggling with this problem. So, hmm.
So I've seen a few good ways to clean this up. You could make a
Yeah.
helper function with whatever signature to maybe do some common functionality that you want.
Right.
And then also your idea that you said this would be easier if everything were a list. That's true.
Yeah.
But you want to return an object where if there's only one value, it's not a list. So
Right.
maybe you can kind of go down that route too and manipulate the data a little bit more before you return it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so yeah, so just I guess spitballing. Then I mean, that would be good. I guess that typically these aren't that long, so that seems inefficient to then run over it again. But also, it's probably not that consequential in this case. A helper function, I guess, I'm thinking like functional higher order callback. I really like those, although that would be better, I think, if there was some clear thing to factor out here, and I'm sure that there is if some people have tackled it that way, but I'm just not seeing it right now. So I do like the idea of, in that case, just making it a list, because then it's really, really extraordinarily simple. I think we can just try to get that. If not, if it's not there, then it'll be an empty list, and then we can just do one of these. Really, we can just do the append, I think. So we can really massacre that lower bit, since it shouldn't matter at all at this point. And then we run through and sort of reprocess this for key in param values dot keys. We can say something like test the length of it. If param values of key, or if the length of that is just 1, then we can say param values of key is equal to, or we need to get this one, so val equals param values dot key. Then equals the very first element. There's only one. Okay, so run through the keys, get the value. I think that should work. Maybe not. Foo. That append key that 1. So that's line 2. So that messed up on foo, which does have parameter, right? Foo equals hello. Here, foo. Oh, I see. I was just getting the current value. What I meant to do is param values is equal, or param values of key val 0 is equal to that, so that it returns a list, so that we can ensure that it's always going to be a list.
All right. Cool. So that does it, and that's definitely more tidy.
Yeah.
So there's another big part to this question. I'll show you, I guess, another way that this is commonly done. So you can also do something like def get key value and then key string, where that's something like foo equals bar, the string like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you kind of simply parts equals string dot split.
Mm-hmm.
And then if len, I forget how to do a ternary in Python.
Right.
Equals 1, and then you can return I guess parts 0 true, and you get the idea.
Right.
So then you have your key and value defined up here.
Yeah.
Which,
that's
yeah, I think that's the most natural way to do it, but the way you did, the other way you did it is just fine too.
Yeah.
All right. So the next part of this question, we're going to do the inverse.
All right.
So, build query string. Supporting all of the cases that we've mentioned in the past.
Sure. All right. So let's think about that. So we've got a dictionary. So then we can just start this out because we know it's going to need a question mark. And then we'll do, okay, so do love for each loops for key and params.keys. They seem so natural to me. Okay. I just like this so much more than the like Java style syntax.
Oh, right. We have to index the elements.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for key params keys, okay. So basically, get the val. Equals params with key, and then either it's going to be a single argument or it's going to be a list. So here's a question: do we need? I guess there might not. Yeah, be a way. These. There's no way to reconstruct order with like these, right?
Yeah. So the order of the keys. Let's not worry about that.
Yeah.
Unless.
All right.
Unless. Yeah. It's one of the keys that has multiple values.
Yeah. All right. So then I think in that case, then we just need to say something like, so it probably would be just convenient to get some helper function which would return a single, something like get single query from basically key and val. It's really an extraordinarily simple function, but that's just nice to have. Okay, so then basically, if this is a single argument, then it's extraordinarily simple. We need to continuously concatenate these. So basically, we can say link val equals 1, then query string plus equals get single query key val. Else we need to handle the list, so we just have a nested loop. So else for partial value val query string plus equals get single query key partial value return query string. Just to read over that, I think that should work. Oh wait, but I'm calling length on a value, which might be something like a string. I guess here would be a good case for type checking, which does seem, I don't know, it feels unnecessary. But again, this would just be a one-line change. So if type of val equals list, then we can do this. Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, I think that should work. There's no fence post issue with. Oh wait, there is actually the and, because the very first argument doesn't have that and, that ampersand. I mean.
Yeah.
So then, So I suppose, basically, well, because we don't really necessarily know. So this is one of those cases where it would actually be very nice to have that in text. just to do a single check. But that's not so nice. I guess what we can do otherwise is potentially um, print the argument. So this isn't that nice, but we can just do the opposite order of this, and then at the very end return query string -1. It's not very pretty, but computationally that's totally fine. So I think that probably is just the simplest way to hatch this up, so that it will, concatenate those ampersands onto the end, and then at the very end there will be an unnecessary trailing ampersand, and then we just return the whole string without that ampersand.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So I think that should work.
Let's try it. So pretty much there. We have this true here that
Oh, right.
showed up.
Oh, yeah. I entirely forgot about that case.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. So then, yeah, that's definitely something to handle. So then, so I suppose that would be something in the get single query to handle there. So basically, we can say, and I think that we need that because we can't just do like if val, because a lot of things are true.
Yeah.
Else. And then there we just need to say key. Okay, let me just check if I've forgotten about any other edge cases here real quick. Looking at that string as again, third. Bar. Okay, I think that's looking good.
Okay. Go ahead and give it a run. See if it works.
All right. So I just do start call. Oh, no, start call. That's from the nope end call. There.
Yeah.
I thought like start function call. Okay. So yeah.
So that does it.
Yeah, that does it.
All right. So one more question. Probably the last talking point for this. So what's the what's like the runtime complexity, where n is the number of values in the input string of this build query string function?
Right. Okay. Well, so I step through each of the keys. I grab the value, and then I either handle the value once, or I look at each value in. I look at each value once, I believe, since I've got that helper function. And then I don't have to handle anything weird fence posty here. So I think it would just be O of n, where n is the number of values.
All right. Is that your final answer?
Well, it makes me think otherwise. But I think I do, just to sort of gloss over it, as like the number of function calls per values. There are additional tests that go on, but those each take one. So I think it would be O of n.
Okay.
I mean, I have two loops, but that's really the same thing, right? Because the loop is just going over, because the number of values will account, right, for there being. So the number of values is just the number of values regardless of type. When I was hearing number of values, I was just thinking like, number of values with basically the list split up.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So I guess looking at this more generic, more radically simplified section that I have highlighted, what's the runtime complexity there?
Okay, so that's just O of n. In range n, right? Yeah. So you're concatenating to a string, which might be weird. That might have to traverse the entire string or build out the list, assuming the underlying representation is a list.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens in a lot of languages like Java.
Yeah.
I think JavaScript does some fancy stuff behind the scenes to buffer the strings,
Mhm.
so that doesn't happen so much. I don't know if Python does this or not, but let's assume that it doesn't do this, and that is order n squared. Um, would you,
Sure.
with that insight, and kind of given how this function would be used, is that something that you would want to fix, or if you did want to fix it, how would you fix it? Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So from just like the very first flush idea, I would think to instead build this out as a list, just adding those query strings to a list, and then use join. Which I think I'm assuming that the underlying, since that's a library function, I'm assuming that that would be very quick. The other thing we could do is
Well, that's a perfectly good answer right there. I guess I'll stop you there. And then that simplifies this logic, and you don't have to have these
right,
dangling ampersands and things like that.
yeah, just join on hand, yeah.
Yeah, but in practice, do you think that would make much of a difference given what this function does?
In practice, I think these are usually right. These are running. I think if you're transferring a ton of data over HTML, I mean on the web, as I understand it, you use a function which won't send that in the URL. So I don't think that there will be that many, um, you know, that there will ultimately be that many arguments. But at the same time, I think there's kind of already enough slowness on the web that it would be worth redoing, even just because it's so simple as doing the join,
Yeah.
using the join function.
Okay. So right. So you're saying you don't really expect to see much of a benefit, but since it makes the code more simple, like why not?
Yeah.
All right. That's perfectly valid. Um, cool. And then yeah, I think some browsers, I know Internet Explorer limits the length of a URL string to like 1 to 4,000 characters or so, and some modern
Yeah.
browsers that goes way up. But you're right. Like nobody wants to copy a 20,000 character URL and send that or tweet that because
Yeah.
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 Cool. Um, all right then. So that is the part of the interview. That's all that I wanted to go over for that. So kind of the mock interview is over, but
Yeah.
we can definitely chat about all of this.
Yeah. Definitely.
So first of all, how do you feel? How do you feel this went?
Again, I think like I really do think it makes me kind of cringe looking back at the Google interview, which I don't think is as bad as I've made that in my mind. But it's like if I think that having that single experience made me so much better at these kinds of things, just because you know what to expect. I think it went for the most part well. It's weird feeling the kind of block that you get, just from being so on the spot and knowing like that you've handled these things before and you hardly think twice about it. Um,
So what blocks are you referring to?
just in terms of like, so for example, like with this up here and the craziness of if statements,
Right. Yeah,
you
that's
know,
what I was thinking of.
yeah, I would just sit back and kind of think about that for a second. In an interview context, it's tough to sit back, and I feel like it's maybe this is not the right thing, but I feel like it's awkward, at least if nothing else, to just go silent for a while. Um, so I like to sort of carry forward my ideas, or I have a tendency to carry forward my ideas, even if I'm just blazing into terrible territory. So that's kind of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think that was a pretty decent approach. You definitely did a good job of talking and programming at the same time, and you're right. There weren't really any of those big silences, which
Mhm.
are pretty much always bad to have.
Yeah.
Um, one or two of those I think are forgivable if you're really thinking through a problem.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I guess I'll go over this in kind of two phases. The first part was you describing yourself.
Mhm.
So I think you did a pretty good job talking about your background, and we were able to have kind of a back and forth around the projects that you're working on, and you were able to really use some relevant industry terms. You were speaking about it in a very like comfortable way. You didn't have to pause a lot. So to me, that makes it very evident that you were. A big contributor to those projects, and you weren't really just kind of on the side taking credit for it, which can be the case with new grads. So I think good job kind of explaining that project in detail.
Thank you.
All right, what else did I put down? So and you also kind of explained a little bit about what motivates you. I think you said that actually verbatim you're fascinated to work with and transform data.
Mhm.
So that's good to hear that if you were interviewing for a role where you could do that, that lines up with your interests.
Yeah.
um, uh, and yeah, so also one of the things that I think I kind of had an idea as you were explaining your project is you said that you're thinking about maybe making a React project to put online and help get some more exposure. I think something that might be just as valuable or possibly more valuable would be for you to kind of document your findings on your text generation problem, because that
Mhm.
sounded pretty interesting, and that seemed to be where your passion, skills, and interest. Well, passion and interest, I guess, are fairly
Yeah.
similar. Which is I think really good, and I think that would if you did a good job, documenting that,
Uh-huh.
even if your article just says like, "Hey, I tried this and this didn't work," like
Uh-huh.
that's still valuable. And then
Yeah.
also if you can kind of show, the fluency that you had as we were talking about that in your post, I think that could be really valuable.
Right. Yeah, that's very good to hear. Yeah. So, sorry, I'm just writing some notes.
Sure, sure.
Um, yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's definitely it's definitely good to hear, and I know that it's an interview. I sometimes get I'm not sure if something comes across as ranting or if something comes across as like basically you're getting what I not like getting the project, but what I'm trying to put across in terms of what I find fascinating about it, or if I'm just basically speaking gibberish.
Right.
Yeah. Uh, so that's really good to hear, especially because I think that's most difficult with the things that I am passionate about, because it can kind of be tough to put on the brakes or to condense and not just when you're thinking about something like that. I feel, or when I'm thinking about something like that, I tend to you know go off on tangents or something, or
Right.
just whatever, because it is legitimately interesting, and so I'll think about something about it which was interesting and get way off of my original thought. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
very good to hear, and definitely that I can at least focus on that.
Cool.
Uh,
And then also too, if I think this is in line with what you were just saying, if you
mhm.
are in an interview and you feel that kind of what you're talking about in this machine learning space is not really in the comfort zone of who's interviewing you, and they're not really grasping it, maybe take a step back and use that as an opportunity to kind of speak about it in terms that they'll understand.
Yeah,
If you could potentially even teach them something about the field, that would be very impressive as well. So
definitely.
so that's also it shows another skill around communicating your knowledge to other people. So that's something that engineers are. It's a myth that engineers are really bad about communicating their thoughts and ideas to other people. Say
Uh-huh.
engineers communicating with designers, or
Yeah.
communicating with like product or the CEO, stakeholders
Right.
that don't really have the same knowledge that you do. And
Right.
then to be able to communicate that knowledge to someone that is not familiar in that area is really valuable, and to demonstrate that as a fresh grad would be very impressive as well.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. It's good to hear.
Cool.
Yeah, and yeah, definitely good knowledge for for potentially not talking to an engineer. I I feel kind of awkward sometimes, really glossing over being so hand wavy. In terms of just even when you're talking to another engineer, like it feels hand wavy to say a lot of the things that you might even know they have an awareness of, but um, uh, just in terms of like um, in terms of like it sounds ridiculous to like attribute an actual like the some of the terminology around like long short term memory to so directly map that to the human concepts of long term memory and short term memory.
I see.
um, but at the same time, it's a great point about communication. I feel like, in that really you're just, I mean, yeah, you're trying to communicate. You're not trying to actually teach these people how to how to do it, or not trying to teach anybody how to do it themselves unless they're interested in it. You're trying to get across the higher order or the higher level, uh, lots of abstraction, what it's doing under the hood, how it kind of tends to function.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Yeah,
so I think to be able to talk about that project with someone that has no idea about machine learning or vague idea or is an expert in that area,
yeah.
I think you can do yourself great justice in all of those cases.
Great. All right. And then, so, how do you have any feedback about like how I do approach the problems in the technical interview? Like, would there be a I don't know, a clearer way to approach those?
I do. I have a lot of feedback around that.
Great.
I think one of the things that you should always do in an interview is ask clarifying questions before you get started.
Right.
So that includes one of the most obvious ones is like can I assume valid input? And
Right.
given this problem, I think we both kind of already understand what a query string looks like, and understand that we
Yeah.
both understand that as well. But if it still may be good to maybe not with this example, but with a different question to ask, like, well, is this valid input, or to kind of clarify what that valid input is as well.
Right. Well, yeah, it's kind of even ridiculous looking back. I think I mentioned like assuming this is correct. Like,
Right. Yeah.
I
You
should have
did.
asked. Obviously, then
Yeah.
is it going to be correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you did say that, and yeah, it's just one of those things. Kind of as I was saying earlier, it's so effortless, but if you remember to do it, it does help you
Hmm.
notably. Even if the answer is like yes, you can.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, they thought about that.
Yeah.
Most candidates don't, and that's definitely the case for me. I'd say only about 10 or 20% of people actually ask questions like that.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's an easy way to make yourself look better.
Definitely.
Um, so I could tell that you're pretty fluent behind the keyboard. You were I don't know if you're using any kind of keystrokes, but it looked like you were jumping around, cutting and
Mhm.
pasting code. You were using like the unpacking of values in Python. So it's also, as well as the I don't know what you call this, but the kind of indexing here where you can basically do like a
Oh, right.
substring or
Yeah.
with a list. So I guess these are things that people that are kind of casually proficient in Python wouldn't really know. So that's good to see
Mm.
that you're kind of familiar with some of these kind of less trivial pieces of the like syntax of the language.
Right.
And so for fresh grads, like what I typically look for, and what I've seen all other companies look for in fresh grads, are people that they already have the practical knowledge and in what they're looking to hire for, and then they're willing to train up that candidate in that area. So what I mean by that is they want someone that if they're going to be doing machine learning, they're familiar with TensorFlow or whatever other kind of libraries you guys are going to be using. But most importantly, like they know Python, they know the Python syntax.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, so that you have some base to work off of.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Uh, so yeah, so you in your the way you tackle the problem, I think the pacing was good. You're right, there weren't really any awkward pauses. I think we finished kind of in purely timing wise. It was kind of in the middle of the pack, but it was but that's good.
Yeah.
Um, and so you noticed when with the typing, whenever I introduced that second feature request where you can specify key multiple times, you realized
Uh-huh.
pretty instantly that there are three cases there and not two. And then I
Uh-huh.
think you forgot about that, and
Yeah.
then you got back to that. But that was good that you saw that because
Uh-huh.
not everyone sees that right away. Um, yeah. You also mentioned like performance impact of making all these things lists and then unpacking the single value lists into just the value, saying that well that's performance there doesn't really matter. That's good to see that you recognize that, because also it's I guess with some candidates they can radically prioritize negligible performance inputs over readability of code.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, that's what I've always heard is like optimize last, basically.
yeah.
Or yeah, you prioritize optimiz like you optimize when you recognize that you are in need of optimization rather than just going from that right off the bat.
Yeah, and then too another some other good questions too, for clarifying questions before you get started. Say if especially if you're kind of don't really know, if you're kind of stuck on the problem, is to ask, well, are there any runtime or memory complexity expectations for this solution here?
Right.
And then yeah, generally start with a naive solution and get it more performant from there.
Yeah.
That's pretty much all. I don't really remember ever going into a problem where you can't work forward from the naive solution. So that's
Right.
yeah. Um, yeah. What else? So I guess my higher kind of order feedback. I guess
Mhm.
I'll give this after I hear a little bit more about what happened in your Google interview.
Yeah.
So so tell me about that.
Yeah. So I think the big thing I feel like I was just kind of caught off guard. I definitely wasn't in my element. Like we were in Charleston, and so I was kind of awkwardly like shoved into this little spot of the house we were renting. And I expected a little more of the or like I was prepared to sort of warm up with a bit of background, that kind of thing. But it was very much we jumped straight into the technical interview.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually like, "Hi, Luke. My name is this. Hi, yada yada. All right. So, do you have the document open?"
Yeah.
So, yeah, that just kind of I think knocked me off balance to begin with. And then I was so focused on figuring out the problem and kind of a little bit frustrated from I think first encountering the like slight block that you get during interviews,
Mm-hmm.
that I was talking about earlier. Um, that I think came across as frustrated. So like at the end, and this might just be the thing he says to everybody, but I feel like it might have actually really been how I came across. He said like, make sure this is what you really want to do.
Oh.
Programming. It's yeah, but my heart kind of sank with that. I really do love this. And so yeah, I think that I just came across basically as frustrated. I opened very strongly, but then didn't generalize. So assuming they don't care about, I mean, I think it's a very common problem. Like it was very much oriented around merge sort, and then when I thought about it afterwards. So just in terms of like the interview block, like the first question was just merging two sorted arrays into one additional sorted array,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then that I did very quickly because because I had actually studied up on merge sort beforehand, just because like my brother says that that's kind of ridiculous to study up on particular algorithms, but that's always been kind of tricky for me, and I feel like it gets at certain elements of programming that are in general tricky for me. But so I felt like great with that one. So I kind of like flew by that one, and then his second one was generalizing that to like n sorted arrays, however many.
Hmm.
And I was just kind of caught off guard enough about that. I think that I had been studying so much on specifically the exact element of her sort that I kind of was baffled and couldn't get back on my feet. And then thinking about it afterwards, I realized kind of stupidly, like that is just one step of merge sort, because basically what I tried to do is merge them all at once, do that merge portion. But so then I'm comparing one array to the first element of all other arrays, and so there the complexity becomes like nightmarish.
Oh,
But
right. Yeah, I see. Because I guess you need a separate sorted array of the first value of all of those arrays.
yeah, yeah. And so really what you can do is just take it as like some middling step in merge sort when I thought about it afterwards, right? You can just compare two arrays at a time, merge those up, and then you've already got the what do you call it? The basically then the assumptions of merge sort are satisfied for all of those, pairs of arrays, and then you can just merge those pairs in, and it's the same complexity as merge sort.
Yeah.
So that was just so obvious after the fact that I beat myself up over that. And then, I don't know. I definitely think it's helpful to have to be able to talk about, your experience, your projects, and all that, just to warm up. But I can't blame it entirely on that. Also, it was just not really taking a step back and approaching the expanded problem from the ground level, which even though my parse query string kind of got out of control here, I'm at least a little happy to say I think I handled it a lot better than the expansion of the problem during the Google interview. And certainly in terms of like approaching it enthusiastically, I guess would be the word to use.
Yeah. Um, right. Yeah. I guess it can catch you off guard if you're with someone that doesn't seem to be, I guess, particularly enthusiastic or warm.
Hmm.
And then in the back of your mind, you're constantly doubting, like, well, does this person hate me as a candidate?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I've definitely even experienced that recently.
Hmm.
But yeah, so I guess the big things that I want to say in response to that, your so are you so the way that Google interviews, I'm assuming that they had a recruiter or a hiring manager, probably not a hiring manager. You spoke with a recruiter, and then you had this phone call, and then
Yeah.
after that there would have been on-site and maybe references and and an offer.
Right.
So that's kind of a pretty basic formula, and in that funnel, what they do is try to knock out a pretty significant chunk in each part of that funnel,
Uh-huh.
and the focus of the phone screen, from what I've seen in the companies that I've worked at, is kind of a baseline. Does this person can this person program, and by extension, does this person want to program? And it sounds like your Google interviewer felt that you didn't actually want to program.
Right.
So yeah, I wouldn't take it personally or be caught off guard. I would actually expect the phone screens to be like, "Hi, this is my name. Here's a
Yeah.
problem. You work on it while I kind of silently listen." Like they might not
Yeah.
even give you that much feedback throughout the whole thing,
Right.
because they've probably they might even be doing two or three of these every day, and they're just tired of it by then.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a slog.
Yeah. So I would definitely yeah, not take that personally.
Mhm.
In addition to that, I think kind of the most interesting part of or one of the very interesting parts of this query string parsing is coming up with a way to kind of manage all that complexity.
Mhm.
And what I prefer to see is for someone to um, kind of write that instead of like copying a bunch of code here and there and here and there,
Uh-huh.
to kind of write that ideal solution and kind of go to that first.
Right.
um, and if someone does kind of write like the more expensive solution and then transitions to the other solution pretty quickly, that's all right too, I guess.
Yeah.
But the kind of pattern of first copying code and then coming back to it if you have time is something that engineers don't really like to see, because that can really lead to compounding complexity in code bases very easily.
Yeah.
I think my biggest piece of feedback the since you handle the merge sort really well, that was kind of an algorithm that you studied, and then when it was more generalized, that's when you had trouble.
Yeah.
And I think similarly with this problem that I gave you, I think practicing some dynamic programming problems that aren't these cookie cutter kind of
Yeah.
algorithmic solutions would probably be the best place to spend your time, with maybe in the addition of like writing about kind of your text generation algorithm
Yeah.
or some
Yeah.
portfolio project.
So I've been working on like just every day. Well, not so much lately because I started to really ramp up this other project, but for a while every day I was kind of doing some leet code. How helpful do you think that is?
Lead code. I haven't. You'll have to send me kind of the problems that you're doing.
Yeah.
Some of these sites have the the quality for these interview questions that I found online are really hit and miss.
Yeah, definitely.
So I could give you a better response to that offline. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, if you're doing that already, keep at it then. That's good.
Awesome. All right, yeah, yeah, I think that's definitely helped a lot in terms of just like so much. I actually encountered this a lot in school. I think, you see the problem and you can understand it, but then in the application you might really just not get enough pure volume in terms of like I can work on my own projects as much as I like, but it's essentially solving one very big problem very thoroughly rather than encountering a lot of small problems, that you have to really hit on the first try, which, is presumably more of what at least a junior level job is dealing with, right? It's sort of like getting the stuff down that might not necessarily be at the level of attention of their more senior programmers, at least as I just expect from not having ever had a programming job before. So I think that, yeah, that's probably at the very least for an interview context, then I think that would definitely be a good thing for me to keep going on.
Yeah. So were you saying that as especially as a new to the industry, you'd be working on these dynamic programming problems and kind of decomposing these things
Yeah, just
yourself?
like,
Yeah.
yeah, encountering sort of the stuff that needs to be handled that's not really, I don't know, not really like that sexy, or in terms of like not absolutely pivotal to the company or not like foundational to the algorithms that they are using, but stuff like parsing query strings.
Yeah.
Not that, I mean, I assume that there are a million ways to do that with or I know as a matter of fact that there are a million ways to do that. But that are just sort of prefab. But in terms of like, I guess it you'd be handling sort of the more day to day problems that you might encounter.
Maybe that's not always true. I think,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I guess it kind of depends on the area that you're working on. Maybe
Right.
to familiarize yourself with the code base, you might be doing some of the more mundane things.
Uh huh.
I guess it really depends on the team,
Uh huh. Yeah.
and hopefully
I
you can
mean,
get an idea of what that looks like.
yeah.
Yeah.
I would definitely prefer to be doing it the other way around. Honestly, that internship was kind of perfect because it was so much, just so like creativeness basically.
Right. I wouldn't expect that much autonomy in your next role.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely not.
All right. Cool. Well, I think this went pretty well for the first chat.
Yeah.
For the next time, I think good thing to focus on would be one or two dynamic programming problems, and hopefully we
Great.
can kind of tackle those with the same pace,
Yeah.
and not resort to a bunch of kind of copied code,
Uh,
and come up with a yeah come up
Great.
with a solution.
And so by dynamic coding, you don't mean the like vocab word? It's just since I'm coming straight out of university of like memoizing, like recursion with solving sub problems, or but like just a problem that I've never necessarily seen before. That's just kind of get tossed at me.
Right. So like, yeah. So basically, you're asking what I mean by dynamic programming.
Yeah.
Yeah. So right. So what I mean by dynamic programming is yeah, exactly. So it's a kind of a more generic problem that you have to decompose into maybe a few helper functions, where one might be like sorting some values, and then another one might be doing some kind of um, arithmetic on top of those sorted values.
Right.
So yeah, so I guess kind of this here is a very simple dynamic programming problem where you
Yeah.
have to do some string manipulation as well as some type checking and kind of get those pieces to fit well together. It's not just
Right.
like sorting some values in an array.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so really just about all programming is dynamic programming until you decompose it into
Yeah.
the smallest fundamental parts.
Yeah.
So yeah, um, yeah, that's it.
All right. Great. Thank you so much. This was really helpful. Just this first interview.
Great, great. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Luke. I did too.
Yeah.
And
All right.
yeah, if you want some feedback on your resume too, you can send that.
Great.
Send
Yeah.
it over. I can give some bullet points.
Yeah. How do you think I should send that?
Over email works.
Over email?
I can send you
Okay.
my email address.
Yeah, great. All right, yeah, that would be really helpful. I think just no matter the level of tips.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Sure thing, Luke. See ya.
See ya.